Think about the worst decision you've ever made. Maybe it was a relationship you stayed in too long, a job you took for the wrong reasons, money spent on something you knew, deep down, wasn't worth it, a conversation you handled badly, a chance you didn't take when you had it. Now ask yourself, were you stupid when you made that decision? Probably not. So why did you make it? That's what this video is about. Not how to make perfect decisions. Nobody does that. But why smart, capable, well-meaning people consistently make choices they later regret. Because the answer isn't what most people think. And once you see it, you'll never look at your own decisions the same way again. Here's the first thing you need to understand. Your brain was not designed to make good decisions. It was designed to make fast ones. For most of human history, survival depended on speed. Is that rustling in the bushes a predator or the wind? You didn't have time to weigh the evidence. You ran first and thought later. The brains that survived were the ones that acted quickly on incomplete information, not the ones that deliberated carefully and got eaten. That worked beautifully on the savannah. It works terribly in a world where you're choosing a career, a partner, an investment, or how to respond to a text message. We are ancient hardware running in a modern world, and the glitches show up every single day. One of the most powerful glitches is something called present bias. Your brain places dramatically more value on what's happening right now than on what will happen in the future. Not a little more, a lot more. Neuroimaging studies show that when we think about our future selves, the same regions of the brain activate as when we think about strangers, not ourselves. Literally strangers. So when you choose the dessert over the diet, you're not being weak. You're choosing yourself over a stranger. When you spend the money instead of saving it, you're choosing the present you over someone you barely feel connected to. The future version of you, the one who will deal with the consequences, feels distant and abstract. The present version of you feels immediate and real. And the brain almost always bets on what's real. Then there's something called the sunk cost fallacy. And this one quietly ruins more decisions than almost anything else. A sunk cost is something you've already spent, time, money, energy, emotion, that you can never get back. Logic says it shouldn't factor into your next decision. What's gone is gone. Only the future matters. But the brain doesn't work that way. We stay in failing relationships because of how much we've already invested. We sit through terrible movies because we paid for the ticket. We keep throwing money at bad businesses because we've already put so much in. We hold on to losing stocks hoping they'll recover because selling feels like admitting defeat. The pain of letting go feels bigger than the logic of moving on. So we stay. We push forward, we double down, and the hole gets deeper. The worst part? The people who are most committed, most invested, most loyal, are often the most vulnerable to this trap because they care. And caring makes it harder to walk away, even when walking away is the only right move. Here's another one that trips people up constantly, and it has a deceptively simple name. It's called the availability heuristic. Your brain estimates how likely something is based on how easily an example comes to mind. If you can think of it quickly, your brain assumes it must be common. If you can't think of it, it must be rare. This sounds reasonable. It's not. After a plane crash gets covered on the news for a week, people cancel their flights, even though, statistically, the roads they'll drive instead are far more dangerous. After you hear about someone winning big in crypto, you assume big wins must be common, even though the losses don't make headlines. After one bad experience with a type of person, a place, or an idea, your brain flags the entire category as dangerous. We don't make decisions based on reality. We make decisions based on our mental highlight reel, and that reel is almost always distorted by the news, by social media, by our own past experiences amplified by emotion. Now let's talk about something that doesn't get discussed enough: the role of emotion in decision-making. For a long time, the popular wisdom was that emotions cloud judgment, that the ideal decision-maker is purely rational, cold, calculating, logical. Science has since proven that's completely wrong. Neurologist Antonio Damasio studied patients who had damage to the parts of the brain that process emotion. These patients could reason perfectly. They understood logic. They could analyze situations clearly, but they couldn't make decisions. Simple ones. What to eat for lunch. Which appointment to schedule first. They would sit for hours, endlessly weighing options, paralyzed, because they had no emotional signal to tip the scale. Emotion isn't the enemy of good decisions. It's a required ingredient. The problem isn't feeling things when you decide. The problem is feeling the wrong things. Fear when you should feel curiosity, urgency when you should feel patience, comfort when you should feel concern. Most bad decisions aren't made in the absence of emotion. They're made in the grip of the wrong one. And nothing distorts emotion quite like pressure. When you're stressed, sleep-deprived, hungry, or emotionally overwhelmed, your prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for long-term thinking and impulse control, goes partially offline. You shift into survival mode, and survival mode is terrible at nuance. In survival mode, everything feels urgent. Every problem feels like a threat. Every decision feels like it needs to be made right now. And so you act fast, impulsively, based on how you feel in that moment, not based on what's actually best for you. This is why some of the worst decisions in people's lives happen during their worst moments. The job quit in a fit of frustration, the message sent in anger, the commitment made out of fear, the purchase made to numb the pain. The decision felt necessary at the time, but the time was wrong, and the brain in that state simply wasn't equipped to know the difference. There's one more thing worth naming, and it's the one that might be the most uncomfortable to hear. A lot of bad decisions aren't mistakes at all. They're choices. Choices made because the bad option gave us something we wanted: relief, excitement, validation, escape, control, belonging. The decision wasn't irrational. It was perfectly rational given the emotional need it was meeting. You knew the relationship was wrong, but it filled a loneliness you couldn't face alone. You knew the spending was reckless, but buying things gave you a sense of control when everything else felt chaotic. You knew the choice wasn't right, but making it felt better than sitting in the discomfort of not knowing. Bad decisions often make complete sense once you're honest about what you are actually trying to solve. And that's the question most people never ask. Not what did I decide, but what was I really trying to fix? What need was I trying to meet? What feeling was I trying to escape? Because until you answer that, you'll keep making the same decisions, just with different circumstances and different people involved. So what do you actually do with all of this? You can't rewire your brain overnight, but you can build habits that slow things down enough for better thinking to happen. Before any significant decision, put time between the feeling and the choice. Even 10 minutes, even a night's sleep. The emotional weather changes fast. What feels catastrophic at 11 p.m. often feels manageable at 8 a.m. Ask yourself what you're trying to solve underneath the decision, not what you want. What need is driving the want? That's where the real answer usually lives. And when you're about to commit to something because of how much you've already invested, stop. Ask whether you would make this choice today if you were starting fresh with nothing already on the line. That single question has saved people years of misery. You're not making bad decisions because you're flawed. You're making them because you're human. Because you have a brain built for a different era, running in a world it was never designed for, making judgment calls under pressure, with incomplete information in real time. That's not an excuse, but it is the truth. And the truth is more useful than shame, because you can't fix what you don't understand. But you can, if you're willing to look clearly, start to see the patterns. Start to notice the emotional pulls before you act on them. Start to give your future self a little more weight than a stranger. That's not perfection, but it's progress. And most of the time, progress is the only thing that actually matters. If this made you think differently about how you make decisions, subscribe, because this is exactly what we explore here every week. And I want to know, what's one decision pattern you've noticed in yourself that you're trying to change? Drop it in the comments. You might say something that helps someone else. See you in the next one.